Hello, everybody, and welcome to the international launch of the 10th anniversary edition of the Right to Food and Nutrition Watch, which is titled The World Food Crisis, The Way Out. We thank you all for being here with us today. We're excited to see we have a room full of people, and we know some will join a little bit later, coming from other activities. We're also live streaming on Facebook, so we also greet those who are following us virtually. We do hope you will enjoy the discussion today and encourage you to participate actively because we have foreseen an interactive methodology. We will open the floor, so we are looking forward to discussing with you today. First of all, we would like to thank, on behalf of the Watch Consortium, the Global Network for the Right to Food and Nutrition, and FIAN International, FIO, for hosting this event here at their premises. It is, as some of you know, the 4th consecutive year in which we're organizing this event here, so we're really grateful for their support during a very, very busy period of the year, especially. And we wanted to thank the Partnerships and South-South Cooperation Division, and especially Luka Vukavinovic for all his support in organizing this event today. Some further thanks are also due. As you can imagine, such a publication is the result of the work and efforts of really dozens and dozens of people and organizations. So we want to thank them all for their contributions to making this possible. And first of all, of course, the authors. We had this year around 40 authors from around the whole world, and their valuable inputs are very much appreciated, as well as the support from the editorial board members. We also have some of them here today, including as a panelist. And I would also like to give a special thanks to my colleague Felipe Bleifoli, who's also here today, for the support throughout the year in this complex process of producing this publication at FIAN International as a secretariat. And last but not least, we would like to thank the publishers and the donor agencies. These are Bread for the World, Eco Cooperation, European Union, HEX, Miserior, and the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. So before we give the floor to our moderator today to kick off the panel discussion, we would like to say a couple of words on the publication, on its anniversary, and how it has evolved and come about during the past decade, especially for those of you who may not be familiar with it yet. So what is it, and why? Why do we have the watch? Well, the watch is a monitoring publication. It's a peer-reviewed publication that looks at key issues, processes, and developments around the right to food and nutrition. And actually, the idea of having such a publication, an alternative monitoring tool that looks at issues also from a qualitative perspective and not only quantitative. This idea had been around for a long time among some organizations. But then when the major world food price crisis of 2007, 2008 hit, when it emerged, the urgency for such a publication became clearer even at that point in time. So it is not a coincidence that the first issue, that the Zero issue was launched in 2008 in the wake of that major world food crisis. And it was published back then by 8 civil society organizations and social movements. And since then, over the past decade, we have had contributions from around 250 authors from all around the world who have looked at right to food and nutrition issues at the local, at the national, at the regional, and at the global levels. And of course, we have covered on many occasions processes happening here at the Committee on World Food Security as one of the key issues that we're paying attention to, of course. And on a geographic level, we have had articles covering around 60 specific countries and territories worldwide. And if we look at articles taking a broader regional perspective, there's even more, there's around 20 more. So we have had a really quite some geographic coverage if we look at the past decade. For example, in the terms of the regional articles, we have examples from the European Union this year or from Western Africa in last year's issue. What we always like to highlight is like the unique nature of the publication. And this is due to the fact that it is open to those who are on the forefront, who are often most affected by food insecurity and hunger, and their organizations and their social movements. We have had contributions from peasants' organizations, fisher folk, pastoralists, nomads, and many others, all those who are also here sitting at the civil society mechanism at CFS. This publication is open to all of them, and we believe this is really crucial. And we also have, of course, contributions from authors from different backgrounds, including academics, human rights practitioners, UN special rapporteurs, policymakers, and many others. So we believe this makes the publication quite rich from the perspectives and the voices that it reflects. And we also always state that the goal is that it is not just a monitoring tool, but it is also a publication that can support the struggles of those who are seeking to hold governments accountable for human rights violations or other powerful actors such as transnational corporations for abuses of their human right to adequate food and nutrition. And like in the first day, the Watch continues to be a collective effort. At the beginning, we had, as I mentioned, 8 organizations publishing it. Now we have 26 civil society organizations and social movements. And the publication has also become the flagship publication of the Global Network for the Right to Food and Nutrition, which was established in 2013, and nowadays comprises almost 40 organizations. So we really have a huge collective behind this effort of publishing this publication. So as our panelist, Isabel Alvarez, will provide a short overview on this year's issue. She will try to comprise the very rich content in only a couple of minutes, which is a challenge, but we just wanted to say that very broadly, that in this 10th anniversary issue, we're looking back at the past decade, we're taking stock, we're looking at the structural causes of that world food crisis back then, and we're also asking the question how we overcome that crisis. Do the problems that have caused it persist or not? And unfortunately, if we look at the latest information, the latest reports, the answer seems quite clear. Just yesterday, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food was mentioning that there's 4 countries under threat of famine. And very recently, the latest SOFI report, the State of Food Insecurity report that was published here at FAO, has shown that the number of hungry people has increased. And we know that this report looks at concrete indicators that have been broadened, but it still looks at a specific type of food insecurity, at chronic long-term insecurity. And if we would look at other issues and other types of malnutrition, food insecurity, right to food violations, the numbers would be even much higher. So it becomes very clear that the situation around food is extremely acute right now, and that the analysis, the questions, the content of this 2017 anniversary of the Watch are extremely timely and relevant. So this is the context. And today, what we would like to do, as we mentioned, is really look back, but especially look forward. So it reflects on the title also of the publication. We talk about a world food crisis without putting a time frame because it's difficult to say, but we also look at the future on the way out. So this is what we would like you also to contribute with your views on how we should overcome this apparently never-ending crisis around food issues, and even a multifold crisis on many different levels. So I will leave it here. I thank you all for your attention. I thank you all again for being here. I welcome our missing panelists, and we do encourage you to take a look at the publication. You can find it also online as of today in English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. We have it in the back. There will be also more copies around here during the Committee on World Food Security meetings in October. We also invite you to post tweets and follow online if you like doing that. And then I thank you once again. I welcome you, and I will pass the floor to Andrea Ferrante. He's our moderator today. Andrea is president and coordinator of Scuola Campesina of the Consorcio Città dell'Alta Economia. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alejandra. It will be a pleasure to be the moderator because it's very easy to be moderator with such panelists. So I think it will not be a problem. It's an incredible opportunity. There is a before and after the food crisis of 2007. Things totally change. Global governance totally change. There is really a changing mood on thinking on global governance and food agriculture. So it's really the time to see after 10 years what happens, what we have done, how we are answering to all this issue. Unfortunately, the data that Alejandra just shared for us, it gives us hope, but in the same time, we know that there is still a lot of work to do because we are far from what are our objectives that we gave us ourselves. So I really encourage Isabel Alvarez that first of all she's member of the board of editors, but why she's member of the board of editors of this fantastic publication? Because she's an expert on food sovereignty, she's member of URGENCI, very important organization of consumers and producers, and most of all, she's also a member of the coordination committee of the civil society mechanism in the framework of the CFS. So this is a good presentation, and please introduce us the year.
Bueno, buenos días a todas y a todos. Muchas gracias, Andrea, por la presentación. Bueno, a mí me toca como aterrizar un poquito a la publicación, ¿no? A lo que tenemos entre manos y en línea y bueno. Y antes de empezar a hacerlo, bueno, voy a sumar un agradecimiento más porque ella no lo va a hacer y bueno, creo que tenemos que agradecer también a Alejandra por todo el trabajo porque, bueno, junto con Felipe, ¿no? Han sido las dos personas que es verdad que es el trabajo de mucha gente, pero quien nos manda los emails, quien nos repite, quien nos insiste, quien está ahí para que esto pueda estar hoy aquí, pues son ellos y ella obviamente no se va a dar gracias a sí misma, así que yo quiero agradecerle mucho toda esa labor, ¿no? Bueno, 10 años, ¿no? Y bueno, a veces los números redondos tienen que servir para algo, ¿no? Y bueno, tenemos 10 años de publicación en un panorama, bueno, pues no muy halagador. Sí que es verdad que no muy halagüeño, sí que están cambiando cosas, pero bueno, realmente el panorama, como bien dice Alejandra, con el último informe y con los datos que tenemos ahora mismo encima de la mesa, pues bueno, nos tiene que hacer ver el trabajo que tenemos por delante, ¿no? Yo cuando veía el número redondo, siempre es verdad que hacemos aniversarios, nos gusta lo de las fechas, pero las crisis no se fechan. O sea, es imposible ponerle un día concreto cuando empieza una crisis, ¿no? Y menos una crisis alimentaria, ¿no? No empiezan ni terminan en días concretos, sino que un día una situación se hace tan grave que de repente pasa de ser una circunstancia a ser una crisis, ¿no? Y, por desgracia, siempre se llama crisis demasiado tarde, ¿no? Porque es ahí cuando nos viene el toque de atención, cuando nos llama a la actuación y siempre es demasiado tarde para muchas, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, creo que eso también nos tiene que servir para ver que todo esto es un proceso y que tanto para adelante como para atrás, ¿no? Hablando de los números redondos, cuando nos poníamos a ponerle título a la publicación, ha sido todo un reto, ¿no? Porque aunque es verdad que los números y la situación es la que es, nosotras queremos mirar hacia adelante, ¿no? Y queremos ver qué podemos hacer y qué hacemos desde la sociedad civil, desde los movimientos y de las personas que todos los días nos toca trabajar en la tierra y con la tierra para trabajar por la alimentación, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, el título mismo ya ha sido un trabajo interesante, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, la publicación, pues bueno, la publicación, hay artículos que abordan diferentes países, diferentes miradas y bueno, y yo sobre todo creo que yo lo que voy a hacer es destacar varias claves que me parecen que se repiten y que son como nuestras líneas claves a lo largo de toda la publicación y a lo largo del trabajo de muchas de las personas que estamos aquí hoy, ¿no? La primera clave, y que no nos cansaremos nunca de repetir, es el marco de derechos humanos. parece tan obvio, ¿verdad? O sea, que a veces es como, qué necesario es esto y qué triste que todavía a día de hoy tengamos que estar repitiendo y repitiendo y repitiendo que el marco de derechos humanos es irrenunciable y que es nuestro marco. Y todavía en este espacio en el que estamos, en el Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria, que nos toca estar algunas, todavía tenemos que pelear muchas veces por que derechos humanos sea incluido y sea puesto con todas sus letras encima de la mesa, ¿no? Y a la vez que reivindicamos esto, tenemos que reivindicar que no nos sirve la narrativa de partes interesadas, que las personas en el marco de derechos humanos somos sujetos de derechos y que hay que diferenciar mucho entre qué es una persona con derechos y qué es una parte interesada. Nosotras, desde la sociedad civil, todos los días defendemos que somos personas con derechos y que las partes interesadas son otra cosa y que es un nombre que a nosotras no nos gusta porque no nos identificamos con ella. Como dice una compañera nuestra del mecanismo, hay partes que nos hablan sobre los derechos humanos. Nosotras los vivimos día a día. Entonces, bueno, otra de las líneas clave es la necesidad de los nuevos paradigmas y las nuevas miradas, ¿no?, que necesitamos para la transformación. A lo largo de los artículos de la publicación aparecen palabras como el bien común, la necesidad de otra mirada, mirar desde los bienes comunes, desde la mirada del colectivo, no desde una mirada mercantil, no desde la mirada que los mercados nos dicen que tenemos que tener. Es decir, mirar el agua, la tierra, las semillas, los conocimientos y los cuidados, no como un negocio, no como un nicho de mercado, no como algo a lo que podamos ponerle precio, como algo que tiene valor, pero eso no significa que haya que ponerle un número asociado, ¿no? Nuestra visión es otra y para eso estamos trabajando, ¿no? Y también esto requiere de nuevas gobernanzas, de nuevas formas de decisión, de nuevos espacios. Y bueno, al final, si queremos un nuevo tiempo y un nuevo modelo, necesitamos nuestras propias fórmulas de trabajo y de organización, ¿no? Desde abajo y bueno, en horizontal, ¿no?, que es como a nosotras nos gusta trabajar. Decimos que si algo podemos decir es que se ha demostrado en estos años, no solo en estos 10 años, por desgracia en más años, que hay un modelo que no funciona. Si hoy hay más personas hambrientas, o sea, nos sale un informe con más personas, que aumenta el número de personas en el mundo, está claro que el modelo global, el modelo que nos venden todos los días como el único, no funciona. Y nosotras tenemos la suerte, por qué no decirlo, de contar con un modelo campesino, con un modelo agroecológico que es el que ha alimentado al mundo durante siglos. No estamos hablando de experimentos de medio siglo o de 3/4 de siglo, estamos hablando de siglos y siglos alimentados por las manos campesinas, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, para nosotras es importante tener herramientas para trabajar por la agroecología y para trabajar por la soberanía alimentaria. Esa es nuestra meta, la meta de las personas que trabajamos por otro modelo y las personas que trabajamos, bueno, pues por cambiar un poco y por la transformación. Y ahí es donde entra la palabra clave que para mí es soberanía, ¿no? La soberanía de los pueblos para poder afrontar todos estos desafíos, la soberanía alimentaria como meta, y eso implica nuestra soberanía sobre los territorios materiales, la tierra, pero empezando desde nuestros propios cuerpos, que son los primeros que muchas de nosotras tenemos que defender, muchas compañeras, para poder trabajar día a día. O sea, no somos libres ni siquiera en muchos lugares de poder pedir una alimentación justa sin arriesgarnos a que nos maten, ¿no? Y siguiendo por la tierra y por los bienes naturales, ¿no? Esos son territorios que día a día tenemos que defender y que tenemos que preservar. Pero también lo que en algunos espacios llamamos los territorios inmateriales, los imaginarios sociales, los modelos de consumo, el visibilizar que todavía hoy el mundo lo alimentan las personas campesinas, que no está en la mente de mucha población, y menos desde un modelo urbano que es el que se nos está implementando día a día, ¿no? El imaginario de que el centro del mundo son las ciudades. Es verdad que son los espacios, ya podemos decir que la mayoría de la población es urbana, pero ¿qué porcentaje de esa población urbana está ahí voluntariamente? Y de los municipios a nivel mundial, yo el otro día estaba en el Estado español y decía, hay 8.000 municipios en este Estado y solo hay 60 que tengan más de 100.000 habitantes y solo hay 300 que tengan más de 20.000. O sea, están gobernando. ¿Y qué pasa con los 7.000 restantes, no? Entonces, no es solo ver dónde se concentra la población, es ver a quienes no estamos teniendo en cuenta en la gobernanza, ¿no? Bueno, pues a lo largo de la publicación van a encontrar un poco referencias también a los retos, a los desafíos, ¿no? Y bueno, y en lo que a mí me toca, hablo como junta editorial, pero también soy autora de algunos de los artículos. Para nosotras no puede haber una nueva mirada sin la mirada feminista, porque es la que realmente deconstruye un modelo económico que todavía es capaz de sumar como ganancia lo que provoca muerte y restarle lo que provoca vida. Es decir, cuando utilizamos ciertos baremos que nos ponen como referentes, el que una persona nazca es malo para la economía y el que una persona muera es bueno para la economía porque hay menos personas entre las que repartir. Desde la economía feminista nos parece que esto es inaceptable. Ponemos la vida en el centro y no los intereses de esas partes interesadas, ni el mercado global, ni el mercado con mayúsculas, que nos quieren vender como con mayúsculas, como referente. Hemos estado aquí ayer en un foro en el que todavía hemos tenido que estar todo el día pidiendo que se reconozcan los derechos de las mujeres como algo básico para cambiar el derecho a la alimentación y a la nutrición. Todavía se nos discute si eso es ir más allá de nuestras competencias. Todavía se nos dice que, bueno, que de las mujeres se ocupan otras agencias, que aquí estamos para hablar de alimentación. No se puede hablar de alimentación sin tomar en cuenta los derechos de quienes a día de hoy alimentan el mundo, que somos las mujeres. Entonces, bueno, este es el marco de temas, el marco global de esta publicación y que pretende, como bien ha dicho Alejandra, y ya termino con esto, ser una herramienta más, una herramienta, bueno, que nos sirva para tener más datos, para consultar, para acompañar y bueno, y sobre todo también creo que trae ejemplos concretos de denuncias, pero también de luchas que están sirviendo para cambiar poquitas cosas, pero todas suman, ¿no? Y que nos da también fuerza para la esperanza y para el trabajo diario. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Isa. And as always, as you can see, this watch gives an example to monitoring what is going on, but also a lot of answers. So this is why it's so interesting to look in depth. And so a first reaction from Marcela Villarreal, the director of the newly named Partnership and South-South Cooperation Division.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. And I just, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having us here. We are delighted from the point of view of FAO that we are hosting the launch of this very important publication here. And this is already for the 4th time. So that gives us lots of pleasure. I see that the interest of the publication is more than evident from the people who are here. First of all, I'd like to start by congratulating you on this 10th anniversary of this, what we believe is a very important contribution to advancing on the issues on food security in the world. So congratulations on this publication. Now, I'd like to just give a little bit, given that it's the 10th anniversary, a little bit of an overview. What has happened from our point of view in FAO, in these 10 years. There have been huge differences from our point of view in the context of food security, world food security in the 10 years. Now, first and more importantly, I think it's important to keep in mind always the trends. So food insecurity has been decreasing consistently since the year 2000, more or less, when the numbers were higher than today. They were 900 million, and today, unfortunately, as has been mentioned, there has been an increase. But before this year, before 2016, our numbers showed a constant decrease. And I think that's an important fact to take into account. Unfortunately, as also Isabel has mentioned, since last year, there has been an increase. And from the 777 million food insecure we had last year, it jumped up to 815 million this year. That is a huge setback, huge drawback, and is an issue of huge concern for us. But let us also look into those trends. Big factor in this increase is conflict. Rise of conflicts, and we know that most of the food insecure, for example, look at the number of stunted children under the age of 5, 122 million are in countries where there's protracted crisis out of the 155 million total in the world. 75% of those who suffer most food insecurity, the stunted children, are in countries where there's a situation of crisis, violence, or protracted crisis. So I think that's important to keep into mind. Now, 10 years. Right after the food price crisis, and this is, I think, and the fact that this publication also rises from that food price crisis is also quite significant. So what happened 10 years ago in this food price crisis? Well, as an economist would say, is there's an imbalance between supply and demand. Whereby the supply had decreased and the demand had increased. Well, that's an economist's view, and it has its value from their point of view. But from our point of view, my point of view, what was really interesting to see there is what are the underlying causes of that food insecurity. There's a structural cause of that food insecurity that became very apparent at that precise moment. One of the big underlying elements there is gender inequality. I fully agree with Isabel on this. Gender inequality is an underlying structural cause of food insecurity. That came out quite nicely. We produced a number of studies at that time to show this gender aspect there. But what happened at that time, as you remember, food prices just shot up through the roof. And food became a matter of speculation in the world world economy. There were unilateral policies that were taken by many countries, which increased the food price crisis situation. And the case of that, I won't go into details, but the case of rice price increased more than others, the wheat and maize. It was because of unilateral policy measures taken by some countries. Now, what was the reaction to that? And here I think is the fundamental point of the discussion that I'd like to point out today. As a reaction to that, what happened? We realized that we need better governance. Help countries not make those unilateral, like for example, decisions like export bans, for example, that shot up the price of rice through the roof. And the idea at that point came out, we have to have a reformed committee on food security. And this, I think, is one of the major things that has happened in these 10 years, a better governance. So before that, before we had a reformed Committee on Food Security, we did not have equal voice for civil society and the private sector within that committee. So world governance on food security increased enormously as a reaction to that crisis, and nowadays, we have the benefit of having equal voices for farmers' organizations, civil society organizations, movements, private sector, together with the governments. Massive point ahead, really. what does that also mean? That the voices of all are important, and they're equally important. And that is a huge step ahead in terms of world governance on food security. We fully agree, and it's a nice quote here in the report, the real solutions come from the people. Well, and we fully agree with that. If we can't listen to them, if they don't have voices in places like the World Committee on Food Security, where are we going to listen to those voices? So this is a very important step forward. Now, and therefore, having a reformed Food Security Committee, CFS, that allowed also to have, in my view, several of the most effective instruments that will help us address the food insecurity situation around the world. And these are the voluntary guidelines for the responsible governance of the tenure of land, fisheries, and forests in the context of national food security, full title, and more recently, the principles for responsible investment in agriculture. So these are instruments tremendously powerful that could not have been possible without a reformed governance of how the world is looking at food security, could not have been possible without the voices of the important actors for food security. So for us, we see that we have advanced enormously in terms of how the world is fit to be able to respond to such crisis as the one that we are facing today. The crisis we are facing today, and it's quite unfortunately that we have 4 regions in the world where we have food insecurity that is increasing alarmingly. And these are 4 regions in the world where you have crisis, protracted crisis, or recent crisis. So that relationship between food insecurity and crisis is very key. It is determining today the lives of millions and millions of people who are facing famine, not chronic food insecurity, actual famine. There is a death by starvation, and this is happening with many millions of people around the world. In these 4 areas of the world, the situation is one of increased conflict. That relationship between conflict and food insecurity is one that has to come much more to our attention. I think the report does a very nice job in looking at the climate change aspect, which is also part of this increased food insecurity problem today and will in the future be even a bigger part of that food insecurity situation. We have to be prepared. How can we be prepared if it is not by listening to the farmers? They are the ones, and I agree entirely, I repeat that, who have the solutions. They are facing the effects of climate change in their lives day to day. They have the seeds that they have developed with their own traditional knowledge to be able to counter some of the effects of climate change. So we need to be more efficient in listening, bringing the voices of all the stakeholders to be able to discuss and advance what the world will be able to do in terms of combating this food insecurity problem, all the more so as in the last year it has increased dramatically. Thank you.
Yes, and maybe we will all remind that CFS has also done the framework for action on protracted crisis, and maybe sometimes we need to use a bit more this fantastic output of the CFS. And so who can say us more on that than Liliane Ortega, Deputy Permanent Representative of Switzerland for FAO, IFAD, and all the UN agency here in Roma on food and agriculture. Please.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to this important event. I want to say that this publication, not this particular issuance, but this right to food and nutrition watch is very dear to us in the Swiss government, and I will explain you why. So I'm very happy to have the last one, the new one, and I will be happy to share it with my colleagues in Switzerland. When Alejandra wrote me, she said I could focus on state accountability to the respect to the right to food, and I appreciate that. Yes, as it has been said by Isabel, now it's 10 years. We have the voluntary guidelines, and it's an anniversary. It's a good moment to make a balance. We know there are many successful stories. After the guidelines have been finished and spread, quite a few number of governments did take it very seriously, and including some of them modifying their constitution and taking very seriously the food security issues. Big success stories, I would say, in particular in Latin America. In Switzerland, what the implementation or the respect of the right to food may mean, we were happy to let's say, to supply the first special rapporteur to the right to food, Professor Jean Ziegler. He did a job he was made for, I believe. And I was lucky to collaborate with him during a couple of years. But then I speak on behalf of the Swiss government, but in particular on behalf of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. What was meaning right to food in our agency? Not much. I mean, yes, at the very beginning it was meaning very few things. We were considering food security extremely important in our work. We were considering that to support food security through, first, supporting very much international research on agriculture, supporting sustainable agriculture through projects in a certain number of countries, and in particular supporting the increase of productivity and market-oriented agriculture. These for supporting an increase of income for the farmers, for the food insecure or the food vulnerable people. But there was no discussion about the global food system. And in particular, I was unsuccessful to open a discussion about the food price, which are directly linked to the income of the farmers in the poor countries. It was impossible. We were just shocking with other rules from other institutions regarding trade. And in our agency, it was considered to be a no-go. I will not say that the food price crisis was good, certainly not, but it provoked an electroshock in Switzerland. First, during 2 months, I can tell you, the parliament emitted an enormous amount of questions to the government. In Switzerland, I may say, I'm pretty sure that no Swiss citizen and nobody living in Switzerland did have any hunger problem because of this crisis. It's impossible. Nevertheless, the media and different movements said, this is happening in the world, and what are we doing? And an enormous amount of questions from the parliament. It's why I was insisting once in an event about the democratic functioning. If you have a direct democracy, you can question the government. And this is how you really stimulate accountability. And among all these questions, some of them very good, some of them quite crazy questions about how to improve the food production in Switzerland using the natural parks and things like that. But there was a set of questions, finally, that for which the Swiss government had to prepare a report. And I was involved in that report. And it's probably the most beautiful accountability exercise I've experienced in my life, because we had to answer seriously to certain questions, how the government was ensuring the food supply to Switzerland in case of crises, long crises. We import about 40% of the food, not much, not more. I mean, we still produce 60%. But nevertheless, it has an impact, as you know, on all the system. So this parliamentarian had elaborated this question. Also, we had some question about energy supply and raw material. One question was about how Switzerland will support poor country coping with food crisis. So one question, but it's better than nothing. Huh? And we were in charge of preparing the answer in our Swiss Agency for Development. It was excellent, the opportunity, because thanks to this exercise of accountability, I could come back with my idea to open the discussion about food prices and the high vulnerability which is created by the global food system. And we could engage in the discussion about the global food system. Because as it had been said at the beginning by Isabel Alvarez, it's not a crisis for 2 years. It's a global system which may be sick periodically. And the vulnerable people will be always the same, the poor people. In that case, we had the image, all of us, of people not anymore in the capacity to purchase their food in urban areas. But also in some countryside area, there was difficulties. So in our agency, still in a dynamic of accountability, we began to look at other aspects, not only these I said before, international agriculture research and project on local solution. We agreed on the fact that income is not enough. Income for farmers, it's not enough, because we very well know that more income doesn't mean better food intake, especially for a certain part of the families. We know it about nutrition and malnutrition, it's very clear. So we began to look at the factor of vulnerabilities. Access to land was the first one who came into consideration. And so we were very active in the negotiation, in the preparation of the VGGT. And further in the supporting their dissemination and use. We also, as you may know, Switzerland had been very particularly here in Rome active in supporting the elaboration of the RAI. To conclude, I just want to say that at the same time, we began to consider seriously supporting the effort of some institutions in monitoring the respect of the right to food. Because the right to food, we shouldn't forget. I mean, in our agency, right to food was tiny. The mandate of Jean Sigler was considered to be folklorical. I'm sorry to say that. We were paying, but many people were believing it was folklorical. But we continue to insist on this aspect that the right to food is a way to convince government to make steps, and the steps made described by Mrs. Villarreal. So we enter into partnership with some institutions, in particular with this purpose. One of it is with FIAN. The partnership was concluded in 2011, maybe? Huh? Yeah. And also, last but not least, to consider important the CFS. After the reform, CFS became important for the Swiss Agency for Development. Before that, it was a CFS, it was a committee within FAO. Only our Ministry of Agriculture was following. But since the CFS was born again in 2009, with the inclusion of the voices of civil society, representative and the private sector, and the CFS we know today, we engage in being more active, in being also more, with more expectations, of course, and in being supportive of the CFS functioning also. So that's what I can, in a nutshell, could say, tell you, could say more. But it's the accountability experience in that case is great. We can see. But there are some preconditions. You need to have a democratic system functioning. If it doesn't work, you can speak a lot, but it's useless. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very much. A couple of keywords for the debate afterwards: monitoring and accountability. That I think it will come back again. Now have the pleasure to give the voice to Edith Rudit. She is Secretary General of the African Network of Women Fisher Processors and Trading, as such also co-president of the WFF. So here a fundamental part of the food producer of the world, the fisher folks, please, and women, please give us your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Fernanda. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by expressing my appreciations to Fernanda for inviting me and giving me the space to share some perspectives from the social movements on this important topic. I think this event is very important because it is giving us this opportunity to look back as to what happened in the past 10 years. What were the issues? How have people, how have actors have dealt with it? Where are we now? And looking on the way forward. So from the social movement's perspective, here I'm speaking when I refer to the social movements. I'm bringing the voices of the food producers, the voices of the peasants, the fisher folks, pastoralists, the indigenous peoples, the rural women, and all those who are involved in the food producing and agricultural work. For me, I would say the right to food is having the voices of those who are most affected being heard. This is very, very important, and I'm happy I heard this also from the previous speakers. The involvement of those who are mostly marginalized, who are mostly hit by malnutrition and hunger is really important, and this should be across the processes of food production, across all the processes of policy designing, planning, implementation, and even monitoring. I'm happy also that I heard this monitoring from the previous speakers, and not just monitoring in terms of producing quantitative data. Qualitative information from the food producers is very important, giving us spaces to share our experiences, our successes, what works and what doesn't work is very important so that it is included in the policies that at the end of the day impact again the food producers. So as social movements, we are in a struggle, and it is a continuous struggle to transform the food systems. The struggles towards the realization of the right to food and nutrition and food sovereignty. So where are we now? When we look at this question of the topic today, the world food crisis, the way out, but again, where are we? Are the current systems working enough to take us out of this crisis? I would say we are not yet there. We haven't yet done enough. And when I say we, it's all the actors at the CFS, the government, the private sector, yeah? Everyone who is included there, we haven't yet done enough. There is still more work to be done. The current food systems and strategies are not yet working well for everyone. It might be working, but not for everyone, and especially for those who are mostly affected. So, yeah, two important issues. The current industrial production model, the way it is operating, is incompatible with the full realization of the right to food. This is a big challenge. And I'm saying this because it's vivid. We can clearly see it through the policies that are driving the food and nutrition, food security and nutrition issues. They have kind of failed to address this multifold crisis of hunger and food insecurity. We may also have good policies, but again, one important challenge is there political will? Because yes, we have referred to here on the guidelines, the voluntary guidelines, as perfect instruments. Yes, they might be. They are good instruments to address all these underlying issues. But to what extent are the governments willing to have them implemented, to guide the implementation of programs, of strategies at the national levels that are in favor of the people, of the food producers, of the women on the ground who work very hard day and night to produce food. And at the end of the day, the women themselves don't even eat the food that they produce. So this is a big challenge. So I would say also the policies that don't work well to address the issues on right to food and nutrition and on food sovereignty, they facilitate land grabbing, and the issue of corporate capture of agriculture is a big challenge to us as social movements. So there is an urgent need to find strategies to address all that, to resist the land grabbing, yeah, to support women and all those others who are producing the food, including men also. But I would also say it is important to have deliberate efforts and actions to amplify the voices of women. Women as food producers play a very significant role in food production, which is yet to be recognized. Yeah? This is important. Women involved in farming, the agricultural workers, the fisher folks, support for them to be well organized. Because, okay, thank you. And the issue of violence against women, because I'm referring to women because I'm having this fresh mind coming from the Women Empowerment Forum. We talked a lot of the role played by women. So supporting women to get well organized so that they come out strongly to amplify their voices, bringing the challenges that they are facing in the whole process of food production into light, so that all those who are involved in designing the policies, the strategies towards food security and nutrition are informed, and to also having the women themselves participate in the processes of policy formulation and implementation, and at the end of the day, the monitoring. So what is the way out? I would say we need to look back into the governance models. We need to go for the models that represent and respond to the voices, to the needs, to the demands of those who are the most affected. So we really need to look at that, and any meaningful progress will depend on the shared analysis, shared understanding of our global systems and the whole meaning of food sovereignty that Isa also talked about it very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edith. We have half an hour to make, I think there is a lot of questions around the room. And otherwise, I will start because I have a number of questions here. But I'm the moderator. I shouldn't be the one that makes the questions. Just
Also, we wanted to highlight that we have some students participating in an ecology training program. They're here in Rome for 2 weeks, and they're meeting some FAO agencies. We do also encourage them to participate actively in the discussions. We also had some interesting discussions yesterday, so also feel free to take the floor, please.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the presentations and the report with very interesting articles. My question is a comment question. So we have from one side challenges, let's say, at the global level on the issues related to right to food. You mentioned the difficulties to advance in the agenda and to ensure the inclusion in some certain discussions. By the other hand, we advanced a lot incorporating it in several of the following frameworks that were developed: VGGT, small-scale fisheries guidelines. Marcela mentioned some of them. So we have advances from one side and difficulties for another global level, and I think we see the same at national level. So some difficult context in some countries, while you can see also a lot of advancements of countries incorporating in the national framework, constitutions, legislations, policies, several countries with some examples of public policies related to this. But why we could advance? What is missing? Even when you have national frameworks, public policies dealing with incorporating the right to food and addressing some of the issues, why is the big challenge? What is missing? So if you, from the different cases that you analyzed, what are the main issues that are missing for us to really give a step forward? My name is Guilherme Brady. I work in the partnership in DPS with Marcela. I'm responsible for the team from civil society organizations, producer organizations, and cooperatives.
Yo creo que se ha apuntado un poco, que lo apuntaba Edith antes, ¿no? Yo creo que lo que nos falta realmente es una voluntad política, porque los marcos están ahí, pero hay que llevarlos adelante. Y luego yo creo también que nos falta, bueno, que hay marcos normativos, pero que realmente hay pocos estados que apuesten por un único modelo. Y tenemos que tener ya muy claro que la supervivencia de un modelo es a costa de la desaparición de otro. Y como bien ha dicho Edith, hay modelos que no son compatibles. Y no es compatible el dejar entrar, o sea, el estar hablando de sostenibilidad y que sea más fácil y, por ejemplo, estar promoviendo un modelo de consumo que sostiene un modelo de producción totalmente diferente. O sea, no podemos obviar que en norte, sur, este y oeste empieza a ser más sencillo encontrar una expendedora de refrescos que una fuente de agua. Entonces, si es más sencillo encontrar una fuente de bebida azucarada, no digamos nombres, que sabemos, que además nos están diciendo que no es parte de una dieta adecuada y tal, si eso es más fácil que encontrar una fuente de agua donde yo pueda llenar mi termo, no vale de nada que luego haya un marco que me diga, me hable de modelos sostenibles. O sea, al final hay que tener una coherencia también en lo estatal, no valen solo los marcos. Y luego a mí personalmente, y muy brevemente, creo que nos falta hablar de nutrición en serio. O sea, porque aquí estamos hablando de seguridad alimentaria y se dice, bueno, en estos años, y es cierto, ha cambiado el panorama de la inseguridad alimentaria, ya, pero el viernes estábamos en un evento de nutrición y se ponía de manifiesto que sí, dejamos de tener un problema, pero empezamos a tener otro. Es decir, no dejamos de tener malnutrición, porque antes la teníamos en forma de hambre y ahora la tenemos en forma de obesidad, problemas cardiovasculares, con lo cual hay que tener una mirada holística del problema y tener una mirada holística también de cuál tiene que ser el proceso para cambiarlo. Y a veces estamos muy compartimentadas. Yo creo que esa es otra de las cosas que nos falta por cambiar.
Yeah, just to amplify what Isa has said, I mentioned it before on the issue of lack of political will. You know, it's really difficult to comprehend it. The implementation of the policy decisions that are done here in Rome happens at the local level, at the country levels. And who is involved in making these policies here? They are the governments. And they are the same people who, when go back to their countries, they are the ones who are expected to facilitate having these policy decisions implemented. So why is it that it's not happening? That's where I'm seeing the irony. Why aren't they making efforts to ensure that these policies are implemented. So here is just, wearing this picture that, okay, we are agreeing with everything that's happening, but in reality, they are not ready to see things happening on the ground. That's what I would say. So why am I saying this? Political will goes with allocation of enough budget to implement programs at the local level that are in favor of food production, right to food and nutrition and all the other strategies. In favor of implementing all these policy decisions, no budget, how will they be done? So policy, lack of policy will, political will is really a big, big problem. But also monitoring, not having budget to monitor the implementation of this, because we are saying, yes, there are some countries who have really transformed. They're ahead of the issues. So what has worked for them that has not been able to work for the others? So how are these others learn from these who are doing well? The monitoring thing is really important. How do we bring in the information from the field, from these women, from these food producers that have worked very well, looking at the local ecological knowledge, that is to say the agroecological practices in the other way. How are we sharing all this so that they are included also in the policies, in the strategies, at all levels, national, regional, and even at the international levels. So yeah, this is what is missing. Yeah, and again, inclusion of those who are affected the most, especially women. They are the ones who are not very well organized. We want to be organized. We are strong, but if we work in isolation, the patriarchy still divides us. Yeah.
Gracias. Quisiera también referirme al tema de la voluntad política que creemos desde la FAO que es fundamental. Si vemos los objetivos de desarrollo del milenio, del 2000 al 2015, hubo 72 países que lograron alcanzar el objetivo que se relacionaba al hambre, a la disminución por mitad del hambre, y todos esos países tenían una cosa en común, la voluntad política. Hubo países pobres, de ingresos medios y no tan pobres que alcanzaron esa meta, pero aún en los más pobres, la gran diferencia ahí fue la voluntad política. Ahora, ¿cómo se genera esa voluntad política? Hay muchos medios, pero desde la FAO estamos impulsando mucho el trabajo con los parlamentarios. Los parlamentarios tienen, y Rudith estaba mencionando el tema de los presupuestos. Claramente la voluntad política es un paso, pero si no hay presupuestos para implementar, no va a ser una diferencia sobre el terreno. Entonces, el trabajo con los parlamentarios tienen el rol de, obviamente, un rol importante en términos de la voluntad política, tienen un rol importante en términos de la rendición de cuentas, el accountability de los gobiernos, y muy importantemente tienen el rol de aprobar los presupuestos. Y por lo tanto, desde la FAO lanzamos en América Latina, que fue entre otras la única región que alcanzó tanto la cumbre de los objetivos de desarrollo del milenio como los objetivos de la cumbre de la alimentación, que son mucho más difíciles de alcanzar. América Latina es la única región que alcanzó los dos objetivos. Creemos que al menos en parte esto también fue, digamos, que hicimos una contribución en términos de lanzar frentes parlamentarios contra el hambre. Frentes parlamentarios contra el hambre son frentes suprapartidarios donde se reúnen parlamentarios de todas las tendencias políticas con un único objetivo común, que es luchar contra el hambre. En América Latina, gracias a estos frentes, se han hasta el momento lanzado unas 20, 25 leyes, incluyendo leyes marco para todo, a través del Par Latino para toda América Latina, pero después leyes en cada uno de los países, sobre seguridad alimentaria, sobre nutrición, muy importante, sobre agricultura familiar. Yo creo que lo que está sucediendo en el mundo con agricultura familiar es sumamente importante. Hubo el Año Internacional de la Agricultura Familiar, estamos por lanzar la década de la agricultura familiar. Eso también ha sido un cambio importante en estos últimos 10 años. Pero usando esa experiencia muy positiva en América Latina, donde ya existen las leyes, o sea, el marco legal es lo que también obliga a los países a implementar. O sea, una cosa es la voluntad política declarada, otras son los instrumentos para llevarla al nivel del terreno. Usando esa experiencia, el año pasado lanzamos el Frente Parlamentario en el Parlamento Panafricano en contra del hambre, también en el Parlamento Europeo, lo mismo, se llama una alianza contra el hambre en el Parlamento Europeo, y estamos trabajando también en varios países de Asia, pensando que esto es algo. Guy nos preguntaba, ¿qué hace falta? Hace falta también trabajar a ese nivel, el nivel del marco legal, a nivel del marco necesario para que estas políticas, estos avances se implementen y tengan un procedimiento también de rendición de cuentas.
Thank you. My name is Benoît Villarreal. I work in FAO, and I have a question about FAO, 10 years after the food crisis. My question is to you, Ms. Ortega. Sorry, because you were describing the kind of shock that took place in Switzerland, right? Before and after the food crisis, you were working on productivity issues, and you were not touching about trade issues. And the food crisis, there was a kind of change in the way the Swiss corporation considered the work on food security and nutrition. So my question is, now that you are in Rome looking after FAO, whether you have seen any such change in the last 10 years in the way FAO has been working, and if not enough, what do you think should be changed in the way FAO works to kind of integrate the lessons from the food price crisis 10 years ago?
Well, it's a very tough question to me. Huh? It's a tough question for two reasons, but thank you for the questions. It's tough because I'm not knowing very much FAO. I'm sorry. So what I know is what I hear. And I would say what I've been capable to observe. No, I'm serious. In our Swiss mission, I'm in charge with IFAD, and I also with CFS. But the FAO is our ambassador. He's a specialist of FAO. So, but it's quite easy from outside to consider, yes, the change has been enormous. And I can only repeat what has been said, because I have observed that, said by Madame Villarreal, when she said we have made a lot of steps ahead. FAO, 10 years or 15 years ago, the first time I came here at FAO, it was 1995. It was for a conference on agriculture. I don't remember which one. But the discussion was about technologies, chemicals, to produce more. We are on another planet today, and FAO has been absolutely key because FAO has offered to be the nest of the voluntary guidelines on the right to food. It was not an easy task. After the World Food Summit in 1996, the right to food was again on the agenda, but nobody knew how to do. So the World Food Summit +5 decided to elaborate guidelines, and FAO offered to be the nest for that and to facilitate. And then after that, we have seen FAO struggling to get the means to disseminate and to do the type of work that Mrs. Villarreal was just explaining now, to engage with Parliament, to engage with different policy makers and decision makers. So I would say now we hear about FAO a lot about social aspects. we have a program about nutrition which is talking about people and not about chemical aspect of the food. So I personally think that we can be more than happy with that. Now, not knowing the details regarding implementation in the country, I cannot say more. But I can say, yes, and I want to highlight something, because I could not, but I want to do it. At the same time, we had the food price crisis, 2008. We had the same year and the year after the launching of the IAASTD report. And it was a report led, which was supported by several UN agencies, among them FAO. And the report is saying a lot about the solution to prevent crises, to improve the quantity of food, at the same time to improve the situation of the small farmers. And FAO has been defending that report, while other institutions, international institutions, in particular financial institutions, did not. And this report has become quite quickly forgotten. But FAO has done the maximum they could, I can tell you. Thank you.
Let me add just one thing. I came here 21 years ago. It's amazing, but it's true, 21 years ago. And I remember coming in and saying, wow, this is fascinating what this organization does. But I spoke to many, many people around the whole of FAO. And afterwards I said, but where are the people? It's about cows, it's about fish, it's about chemicals, and where do we put it? And where are the people? And I think this is probably the big step forward that we have been actually able to give. So now it's about people and their rights and their food security and their views and their voices. And then, yes, of course, the rest is, you know, we want to have healthy cows in order for people to have good livelihoods, etc.
My name is Jolke. I'm from Netherlands. I'm one of the earlier mentioned students for La Escola Campesina. And I was wondering, we've been hearing a lot about the connection between rights to good food and making stronger cases, and the political will being mentioned, and just now also mentioned a nearly forgotten report that says, yes, food security, but also do not forget the role of small farmers. See, I come from a country that's rather famous for its very industrialized agriculture. Intensive farming is the norm in Netherlands, and I'm a small-scale farmer myself, and it's, you know, it's cute, but it's never to be taken serious. It's folklore, indeed. So political will and budget investment, yes. Making sure you can feed your people in times of crisis, yes. I suppose Netherlands ticks all those boxes nicely. Just looking at industrial produce, we've just had an egg crisis and pig crisis. Every year, at least one major food crisis hits the Netherlands because there are millions of pigs on just a square kilometer, for instance. So I was wondering, okay, political will and budget are plenty, but how do we make sure, what tools are there to allocate at least more than 1 or 2% of that budget and of that political will to look at the peasant rights, the small farmers, that actually produce so much of our food? I'm not sure which one of you feels most adequate to answer this question, but it's a...
I don't pretend to answer fully, but I can tell you, because the question in Switzerland is a very hot question. We have small farmers, and they are there because they have subsidized. But why do we have, because we don't have such a, like in some other European countries, such an industrialized agriculture. Actually, agriculture in Switzerland is family farming. And, but it's absolutely not sustainable if they are not subsidized. And why are they subsidized? So maybe it's your question. First, it's because the Swiss population want to have farmers in their landscape. It may look simple, but it's true. It is a cultural aspect of our country. And we can go from one city to another one. Inside the city, you have economists, you have people, they think it's ridiculous. But they are not the majority. So still we have a 4 billion contribution annually to the farmers. And in particular to the mountain farmers. Mountain farmers, it's a professional activity which is absolutely impossible on the economical side. They live, I think my colleague told me it's about 70% of their income is these subsidies. Otherwise they would die, they would disappear immediately and do something else. They produce a little cheese. But why do we pay? So we want them, so we accept this system to be supporting them, but also because they maintain the landscape. The landscape is a source of income through the tourism. So it's a cycle. We have developed this multi-functionality of agriculture. It's very useful, very useful. Also in the dialogue with developing countries, sometimes very useful. Agriculture is not just food production or milk production or cow production. It's a multifunctional aspect of the life. You manage to get your landscape and your territory in a shape you appreciate. It may have a return on tourism, but it may have a return on maintaining some problems, environmental problems. So it's, again, behind there is a political will, but it requires an extremely developed dialogue with the population. And in Switzerland, we are a confederation. We have small states. Every canton is a state. And inside every canton, the dialogue is taking place. So finally, we maintain to have about 60,000 family farming. 60,000, I think. Because we have a system we want to have them. We want to have them. And they don't want to be poor. I mean, they are middle class. Huh? They are not high middle class. They are middle. But we pay for that, and we agree. That's it.
Yes, and now you all have a final round. Don't worry. So we always say we need more farmers, not less. So we totally agree. And so we start with our last round. And I would like also to, you say what you want. But indeed, it seems that we have done a lot of work in those 10 years. There are a lot of guidelines, a lot of documents, a lot of policies, and it's clear for everybody that there is a lack of implementation of all that, and the documents are there, they're not implemented. There is lack of monitoring, and indeed, maybe there is a lack of recognition of the fundamental role of civil society, that there is the main actor really to implement those documents. Are we lacking to recognize them as the main actor? This is the question, but you can say whatever you want anyhow.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to respond to the previous question as regarding the political will. What can be done to ensure there is political will? That was brought up by the agroecology student. I would say the social movements, the food producers organizations at the national level and at the global level, we have a very big role to play there also. Making sure that we are proactive, we know our positions, we are confident, we know the policies that govern the food sector and the policy, the politics behind it, the dynamics. So the governments are the ones who are in the first place responsible to make sure that it's their role, it's their responsibilities to ensure that the policies are implemented. But if they don't, what happens? That's where we come in. We have a role there to demand. So how do we demand if we are ourselves not strong? So I would say we need to continue organizing ourselves. We need to continue being proactive, to have our ears wide open and our eyes also to know what's happening to look at these documents, the guidelines that we are referring to. What are they and what do they mean to us? Do we identify ourselves with them? If not, what do we do? So we bring out all the issues that are of concern to us. We do the accountability. We question why aren't things happening. So advocacy is the main thing that we can do, and we have a role to play there.
Bueno, ella ya te ha contestado la pregunta. Yo solamente aprovecharé el último turno para decir dos cosas. Una cita que me gusta mucho repetir en estos espacios, que es que nunca solucionaremos un problema desde la misma lógica que se creó. Esto no es mía, es de Einstein, pero creo que tenía mucha razón. Y una cosa muy simple, que yo vengo del mundo de la educación y me gusta ser pedagógica muchas veces, ¿no? Y vengo del mundo de la educación, pero ahora también toco un poco el tema de la investigación y a veces estamos muy empeñadas porque los necesitamos en indicadores, monitoreo, ¿no? Bueno, pues hay un indicador muy claro sobre si vamos bien o no vamos bien. Andrea lo ha dicho antes, necesitamos, para tener derecho a la alimentación sana y adecuada, nutritiva, necesitamos campesinos y campesinas.
Food and nutritionally valuable food, we need peasant farmers. So I always ask the same question: how many of us who are in this room here today would be proud of our sons or daughters if they decided that they wanted to be a peasant farmer, for instance, instead of saying that they wanted to be a doctor? Let's ask ourselves that question, and if we're not proud of our sons or daughters wanting to be a peasant, then we need to reflect.
Refer to something that our Director General repeats very frequently. Eradicating hunger, and that's our commitment of everybody here, everybody's commitment and responsibility, is a responsibility of societies. And it cannot be done. It's not governments alone. It's not civil society alone, and not private sector alone. It's societies. And therefore, if we really want to ensure that we will hopefully be able to eradicate hunger by 2030, each one of us has their own responsibility in a different way. I don't think, Andrea, to respond to you, that that the civil society has to be the main implementer and carry that responsibility. I believe everybody has their own responsibility from their own point of view, but we have to have a system of mutual accountability in order to ensure that everybody is taking on their responsibilities. So it's societies who eradicate hunger, and this is why I think we have advanced so much in the last 10 years in making sure that today, as we speak, indigenous people, fisher folk, women's organizations have a voice in something like the Committee on World Food Security.
Thank you. Very briefly, I will not speak about my country on this aspect, but I can tell you I've been working for quite a few years recently in a developing country I will not mention, where civil society is practically prohibited. There is no NGO, in fact, in that country. It's a big issue between development agencies there and the government to discuss about that, to have guidelines, to have the space for the. It's not accepted. It will change, but still now it is not accepted. And I can absolutely witness that all the issue, there is no debate on the right. Our right to food is not an object of debate with the government. There is nobody to defend or accept some project and some external international NGO. They are allowed to work there. But if you don't have a domestic civil society organized, or either the farm organizations or collective, to carry this and to insist to decision makers, it's extremely difficult. So yes, it's essential. It's essential. And in some countries, we have been observing in East Asia that the VGGT have been promoted mainly by civil society networks. but maybe, as you said, alone is not the solution. It's like a mixture. It must be a mixture. It must be, and because it's necessary that then within the population also there is a will to have this civil society. It's a wall. Huh? But I can really say that without civil society in a country, you don't know how to open the door of the government to discuss these issues, because for them it's very easy if you are foreigners and you pretend that there are guidelines to the land access. They say, oh yeah, thank you, but we have also our national guidelines, our system. So civil society must exist there to create this dimension of creating the debate.
Thank you very much. Again, a very interesting presentation, as every year. It's the opportunity to have a very in-depth debate. 10 years so full of work, incredible work. Indeed, everyone can agree that things are totally changed. We have tools that before we didn't have. And those tools are very powerful. Are definitely very powerful. We have already a lot of tools. We are still working to have new tools, and the role of the CFS, but also of FAO in all their committee, because the Fisher Folk Guidelines are a product of the Fishery Committee. So those places that are really open to all, and especially to the right holders, because this is really the big difference, no? The right holders, finally, they have a lot of space. And this is extremely important, and it's definitely unique also in the UN system. So we recognize that, and this is extremely important. But we need, and that it's clear, much more implementation. We need much more implementation, and to do much more implementation, we need to think, and this is also the role, to find a new way to make monitoring. We need to make more accountable the governments, and that it's clear. And it's clear and evident, and what I'm trying to say is not that civil society has to implement, but civil society is the main actor to make government accountable. It's like that. This is the history. This is how it works. And so maybe as civil society in their forms, farmers' organization, peasant organization, fisher organization, NGO, are the main actors to make government more accountable. In that sense, maybe international institutions, governments can invest more on those organizations, because those are the ones that make things moving more faster than others, maybe. And indeed, this publication is part of that work. Thank you very much, and thank you to the interpreters, as always, and thank you all.